Okay, so for this demonstration, what we're going to be using is the Harder and Steenbeck Infinity. This has got the 0.2 needle set in it. Okay, it's standard. And then we're going to be using the Iwata Eclipse. This is the HPCS, okay? This has got the 0.35 needle in it. First of all, little demonstration we'll show. If we just pop this guy in here. Now, all we do, attaching the air, might look a little bit odd, this one. What we've actually got is a quick release, which means it clicks in and it's air then goes through. As soon as you let it go, it stops it flowing out. The little dial you can see on the side here is what we call the MAC valve. Now this little guy here, what it is, you just dial in the air you want. So when you pop it in, okay, pull it, nothing happens, release a little bit, you can hear just a bit, and then if we turn it up, you can probably hear lots of air coming out just like that. Now, sounds quite strong. Same, a little bit quieter. Just show that again. Nice and loud. Quieter. What this is the difference in the needle size. 0.2, 0.35, okay? That's 0.15 of a mil difference. Purely that is the size on the front, which is the amount of paint that comes through. Don't be put off, because obviously we're going to wind the air pressure down, which will bring them basically both together. But that is the difference. This is why these, when you go full whack, you only get X amount of spray. This one you'll get more spray coming out. It will do bigger coverage. But don't be put off, because they will both go down very small, okay? So, for your first time, what I would recommend is water, okay? So we've got a little bit of cardboard here. To be honest, this is just water in a pump, because I'm lazy, okay? So all you do, push all the way down for air. And okay, good little pit here. We've got bubbles at the top. What are bubbles? Okay, what that is air getting in through the front and allowing it to backfill up the needle, okay? Normally that's a really quick fix. It is just because this end is a little bit loose and allowing, like there, it through. Okay, tighten it up. We've stopped that from happening, okay? Now, by using water, it's not costing you any money. You're using air, using the compressor, it's free, okay? So what we're gonna do is just come down and just pull back until you get a little bit coming out. As I say, I can see it better and quicker than obviously you guys' camera, but you can go down and get a feel for how it's happening. So what I'm doing, pushing all the way down, okay, completely, and then pulling back very slightly until I get some paint, or in this case water, okay, and you can just run around now and get a feel and go pull all the way back, and then nothing at all, and then just a little bit, and then you can do just practice pulling, doing a little spotting, and really you're just getting a feel for how it's all working. And it's just water, it's not going to harm your airbrush or anything else like that, okay? So you can just have a play with it until you run out, and you'll hear the noise, and that means you're actually out of air. Right, my little valve here has got a small air leak somewhere, I can hear it hitting. Probably because something's a little bit loose. Oh, it's loose at the bottom. There we go. There we go. Alright, so once you've done that, you can move on. Now all these air pressures I'm spraying out, and I will do for the entire thing apart from freehand camo, will be around about 25 psi. It sounds very high. This is personal choice, it's how I spray it. I know a lot of guys, they spray at 10 psi, they spray at 15 psi. Me, I'm 25, I'm a high air pressure guy, okay? So, okay, we've done that, so what we're going to do, we're just going to take a little bit of acrylic thinners. Okay, this is our Tamiya X20A. We're putting it in the colour cut, and then all we're going to do is just going to give it a little brush around inside here, all up the side of the colour cup, in there. Alright, then I'm just going to get a scrap piece of towel, and we're just going to blow that out into here, because what I've done now, I've got rid of all that water that's in the airbrush, so it's now all lined with the thinner, because water sometimes doesn't work very well with paints. All right, Now, for all of this, what we're going to do for these quick ones, we're going to use black Vallejo Model Air, okay? You give it a bit of a shake to wake it up. And then what you can do, comes in these great bottles and you just squirt it in just like that. You don't need tons of it. And then you can just basically have a little play now, all right? So what we're going to do, we're just going to do a series of little things. So first of all, we're just going to test our flow, make sure we're all okay. Okay, so we're just pulling back, pushing down all the way for air, and just pulling back a little bit. Okay, and what we're going to do is just a series of little figure eights and try and go over it again. Okay, and just follow yourself around and do a few little circuits. Okay, then do some circles and just trying different times. So this time we're pushing a lot more. Okay, this time we're going to do just a little bit, and you can see how much paint comes out and how it goes on. Now, a lot of people will say you shouldn't do it on paper towel, you shouldn't do it on cardboard, you should do it straight away on plastic. I don't believe that. You need to know how your airbrush works without making a complete mess and everything else. So for the moment, quite happy to go onto paper towel. Okay, now what we're going to do now is just demonstrate how the airbrush actually works. So all the way down for air, pushing it down and then lightly pulling back on the trigger until you see paint, and then as you go along, continue to pull that trigger back and then stop. And as you can see, we get quite a small area, and then obviously as we pull the trigger back, it gets wider. That's keeping it the same distance. So we're going to do that again the other way. So just a little bit of paint. And as you can see, we go for as much, and the airbrush is the same distance. The other way we can do it, of course, is to go this way, or we'll do it the same, okay? And then we're going to come out, same amount. And as you can see, it just goes wider but thinner and more dusty looking, okay? And this is the variable of all airbrushing, okay? The closer you are, the smaller the point will be, because just imagine it's just like a cone. As we're shooting it, it's coming out. The further away you are, the wider it is. The more you're in there, the narrower it is, okay? The amount of paint that's physically coming out now will depend on how you actually get it. So if we're down here and we're really close, but we go full paint, we make a big splodge, okay, straight away, because we're too close. Yeah, if we do the same thing from up here, we get a bigger area, but it's very fine. So what we need to do, you find a balance between the two. Okay, so you sort of come in mid-distance and you can colour quite a large area like this in quite quick time. There again, if we go not a lot of paint at all, so we're just going to go a small amount of paint, we can come in now and do tiny little work like this. Okay, nice and tight, and it's all no problem at all. It's very confined, it's not going all over the place and things like that, and this is the balance of it. So what I tend to do with guys is say, right, okay, just do a few exercises. So for this particular one, we're just going to do my favourite, which is the noughts and crosses. Okay, so what we're going to do is draw our board. So we've got nice big lines for the board, and going up and down a few times, and again, and the other way, and back. Okay, and then we're just going to do a game of noughts and crosses. So we're going to say, okay, we're going to have a cross, okay, and we'll do a nought, and we'll do a cross, and we'll do a nought and a cross and a nought. Okay, and then you can see we're quite misty how it is, so we're going to try and sharpen it up now. So the way of doing that, we're going to move closer. I'm not going to put down as much paint, okay? So we're going to do a cross, and we'll do a nought, okay? Now as you can probably see, because there isn't as much paint, it's fainter. That's because you're going to have to give it more coats, and that's something we'll do when we're doing the actual aircraft themselves. You build it up layer after layer, okay? Now we've done those, we want to know where the airbrush actually shoots, okay? So you can do the thing of trying to put a dot in the middle of your noughts, okay? And it's just these little practices. What you're actually doing is working out, when you put it down here, you're not looking down the actual airbrush itself. You know, it's not like you've got a laser sight showing you where it is. So it's just showing you exactly where things are. So when you come in, you can sort of know where it is. So it's just these little exercises just to show when you're going over it and when you're doing circles, things like that, is actually putting it in so you can see where it's going, you know where it's going to be. So it's not like you want to go, say we want to put it in the O, you're coming along and you're doing here and you've suddenly shot out to the outside, okay? This way you're familiarising yourself exactly where it's going to be at any one go. So there we go, that is basically it. So remember, just recapping, the amount of air you're using doesn't really matter at this point, okay? So all air. So nice and tight in there, a little bit of paint coming out. If we just do it this way, we do an up pass, okay? Just a little bit of paint coming out, we can go up. And when we get this effect where it's spitting, okay, it's actually stopping as you're going through. It's probably getting a little bit of build up on the needle here, okay? So what you want to do is grab a brush with your thinners. Just give it a little bit of a wipe around the end of the needle. And then with this one, you can just pinch clean it away. And you'll be good to go again. So if we just try that again. As you can see, no problem at all. But it's where you get a tiny bit of build up at the end. If you've got one of these types of needles, which I call pinch cleans, you can keep a cloth with you at all times, have a little bit of thinners on it, like we've got down here, and then that way you can just pinch, and you might be able to see we've got black lines coming off of it all the time. So remember, if you pull away, as you pull back, it will get wider and fainter because obviously the cone's getting bigger but there's not as much paint. Or you can do the other way, come in and go tighter. As you can see, exactly the same. And it's just finding these balances of it. So what you want to do if you're doing something like this is you're down close, and as you come away you want to be pulling back the trigger to putting down more paint, so you're sort of equaling it. So as you're pulling away, it's just doing that thing, you're coming away, it's a bit further, so it's going to be lighter, so you're putting down heavier paint as you go through. And practice literally colouring in, okay? Because as you notice when you're airbrushing and you're doing this, you'll get heavier lines each side because you're going back and forth. You're actually covering it twice as you go through, all right? So get used to doing random patterns, so you can do little circles for colouring in and going back and forth. Because you're not like a car painter who's got the luxury of going past your model, okay? Chances are you're going to want to keep on that actual area, all right, as you go through. So just practice doing a little thing. So we're just going to come around here, do these edges. Okay, little circles. Okay, try your side to sides. Just like that. And really, that's it. It's really, really simple of how all this goes together. At the end of the day, it's just about confidence, the first thing. Don't worry about it. This here is the same as this, all right? They're just brushes. They are just designed to lay down paint onto your model. It just so happens this one is doing it via air and you're not connected to the model, all right? Instead of you actually touching it with the brush and actually putting it in that exact area, you're doing the same, but you're doing it from a little bit away, okay? So you want to sort of come in with finesse and just do it. But just relax your shoulders, relax your seating. If you feel yourself tensing up and getting really tight, stop, you know, walk around, shake it out, whatever you need to do, because if you're tight, you will be really jerky, and when you get a little bit stiff in the shoulder and you're going round, you're going to cause problems and you're going to have mistakes which really aren't your fault. It's just because you're sort of tense and tight, all right? Enjoy it. It's supposed to be fun, okay? Nobody says airbrushing is easy. It's not. It takes a few years to really get on top of it, to know what's happening. I describe it like doing a hill start on a manual car, okay, on a stick shift. You sat on a really tight hill like this. It's finding that balance point between the clutch, okay, and the accelerator, and when you're coming off the brake, okay? So you're releasing the brake is like releasing the paint, okay? And then it's finding that balance point with the clutch, which in our case will be the air, okay? And the accelerator of actually getting it all down in one, of the amount of paint, the distance and everything else. So it's like a three-way balance, okay, of getting it down there. Just enjoy it, relax, play on scrap things, play on cardboard, paper, old models, whatever you want to do, okay? But that is the thing, just relax with it, take your time and enjoy it, all right? Personally, with me, nobody taught me airbrushing. I'm sort of self-taught. I didn't come easy to me at all. It took me probably 3 or 4 years before I really started to get the hang of it and started to then play with different techniques once I got the basics of putting it all down and everything else like that. So that's really it for doing that. So what we're going to do now is just show you cleaning up your airbrush and the quick ways of doing that. We've got a little bit of paint left in here. What I would normally do is pour it back into the bottle, okay? Don't worry about this thing of contamination and stuff like that. If you're putting the colour back in, even if it's got thinners in, it won't hurt it, because chances are you're going to be thinning things anyway when it comes out the other end. So what I'm going to do is just tip out my excess paint onto here, there's only a little bit. Wipe out the colour cup just a little bit. And then what you could do with, which is a nice little luxury, but they're really handy to have, is one of these guys. This is a very, because it gets caught in all my overspray, but this is a cleaning station. And what happens is you pop your airbrush into it like this, and you can blow out all that paint, goes down into here. So what we're going to do, we have some airbrush cleaner. I like to use the Vallejo airbrush cleaner, I find it's quite nice. Pop it into the colour cup. We have a brush. Make sure it's not one that's dropping hairs. We just give it a little rub all around the inside, down onto the needle, and then you pop it in the hole and then squirt. And what it is, it's squirting it in there. There's a filter in this top area that stops it all coming out the top. Okay, and to be honest, got quite a lot of thinners in here, so it's taken a while to go down. You can probably see it going down in the colour cup on the top. Let it all down out the way for your first one, and you should be nice and clean in there like that. You'll hear it when it's run out. There we go. And then what you do, this is what we call a quick clean. You can just give it a wipe around everywhere. Wipe in the inside, blow it all out down, come in with a second bit, pop it in, and look for it being clean down on here. You don't want to see any bits. It should just be clean, no nasties, no nothing. And there we go, simple as that. Now that's ready to use again for your next colour. You don't have to worry about stripping it fully down at this point. I'm taking the needle out and everything else like that. That's good enough. As long as it's blowing clean through, you have no trouble. If you're not, fill it up again, give it a little bit more of a rub round, and away you go. If you want to go for a deeper clean, all we'll do, we'll just pop that off for a minute. We'll just slack it off the back, pop the needle out, okay, give it a wipe, always pulling downwards, don't do it the other way, okay, and then what you can do, you can whip the front off, give this cap a wipe, again being careful with it, and then what you can do, just take a little bit of thinners on a brush, okay, and just give it a bit of a rub in there. And then just wiping through. And then I would just blow it, but and then hopefully you should see daylight. I don't think this will see it for a minute, but hopefully you'll see daylight through the end. And then what you can do, just pop it back in, all down in here like this. Your needle goes back in there, and cap back on, pop the air back in, and then it's great. Nice, snappy, no problem at all, and then you're good to go, you can go away. There is various other things you can do, there's lubrications for your airbrush and everything else, but what we're going to do at the very end of this, we're going to do through a walkthrough about deep cleaning and stuff like that, and problems and troubleshooting, and we'll look at all of those different things in that section. So there we go, that's the basics of using your airbrush for the first few times of getting it down. What we're going to do now, we're going to set ourselves up and we're going to talk about actually putting down primers onto your models, okay, which is a great way of practicing your paint work, especially if you're new to it, and using it and things like that. So what we're going to do now, clear this away, get some models together and get going with some primer. Okay, so now we can actually move on with actually putting some proper paint down, setting up the airbrush properly for the first time, and actually thinking about how you paint your models and working your way through. Now, first thing to remember is I am just using acrylic paint. I've only been using solely acrylic paints now for around about the last 5 years. Before then I used enamels like everybody else. I switched over, 2 reasons. Purely, first, speed. Obviously you guys see all the work I do, my filming, everything else. I can paint an entire model in an afternoon, whereas if it's enamel I've got to wait for paint to dry, so I've got to wait days and days. So what takes me on a 3 camo colour scheme 3 days to do, with acrylics I can do in an afternoon. Secondly, probably more importantly, is smell and health. Okay, enamel paints are pretty rough, they're pretty toxic, and they stink the house out completely. With me, I'm lucky enough, as you can probably see over my shoulder here, I've got a spray booth. It's a very good one, it's a very expensive one, but it does draw all the smells out and everything else. But still, you always get that smell around from enamel paints. Now don't get me wrong, I've got lacquer-based paints up here. These are the metallics, which we'll be speaking about actually when we do the vampire, because I find that they're the best for doing that type of finish. You can't really get a great metallic finish with acrylic paints. So anyway, what you need to do is think through how you're going to paint. Now from our point of view, we've got this little chappy down here, and he's absolutely done. See, we've got the canopy on and he's looking pretty good just like this. Thing is though, this canopy, we need to pre-shade the actual canopy. By that what I mean is that because it's a clear part, 2 things. Firstly, we want to give the impression that it's already been painted on the inside, okay? So for our case, it would be black in this one. So what we want to do is paint it black first, then a colour over the top of that. That way, from the inside out, it will look as if it's been painted black on the inside. And it just saves having to mask up the inside of your model and all things like that. The other thing about it is, most paints are pretty sort of thin, a little bit translucent, so if you're doing them over a clear, it doesn't look solid, it looks like it's painted plastic, okay? So by putting a black down first, it gives it a totally solid look to it, makes it look a lot thicker and better to use. So from our point of view, if I just slip a pair of gloves on for doing all this painting, things with gloves, no you don't need them. I do, purely because of handling all this stuff. You can slip on gloves in and off. These are just those cheapo surgical ones you buy in pound shops and things like that. And it just saves you getting absolutely covered in it. And if you're doing lots of colours, sometimes what happens is you can get a little bit of another colour on previously, handle your model and you transfer it. Yet when you're done, you can just flick these off, bin them, and away you go. And for the sake of a couple of dollars, it's a quick and easy way of doing it. So for this particular one, we will be using this. Now I know I'm not doing it in the spray bay. We'll look at using the spray bay a little bit later on and talking about the spray bay, but just for the moment I just want to talk to you about basics, and because of that I've got better camera angles to get you in here so I can show you up close and personal exactly what I mean, versus when we're doing it in the spray booth I don't get that sort of good quality. So grabbing our airbrush, so this is just the one we had before, we're going to take, this is the Model Air Flat Black. Okay, so we're just going to put a few drops, we don't have to go mad in here because we don't need anything, in there, coming out, alright. So what you can do now is just lightly dust it over the canopy completely. Now 2 things, one, you can see how good your joins are, and secondly, as obviously and more importantly, we'll get that better look to our glasswork on there, just like that. Now I've got these others over here, so we're going to do exactly the same with them as well. We've got the little Spitfire. Now as you might notice, these have already been primed, but I didn't have the glass work on. I'll bring it up in here a little bit, that's it. So we're just putting on a light thing, and there's nothing to this, we're literally just spraying this on. Do them now. Just like that. Now, have a good look round at the actual glasswork and see how it is. So you want to check, okay, I know this is back to construction, but how the actual seams are and things like that, of actually, you know, where it joins the actual fuselage itself, because if it is a little bit off and something, you can sort of, because it's PVA glue holding this on, pull it off and have a look at it. So that's all nice down there. Now, the other thing is, you might notice down on the inside, we've got the intakes showing. I should have done this a minute ago, but we've got out of step. But what we want to do is just bung that up. So you can either use, obviously, a little bit of tissue, or if you have just any old foam you've got lying around. So we've got this little bit here. So what we're going to do is pop it in the hole. We're just going to push it right down in, and this will protect the fan, which obviously we've painted as we did in the previous one. If you've seen the airbrushing, the construction video, this is the same part it's got going down in there. So there's a bit of foam in there, and it just bungs it all up now and stops it getting all painty and horrible on the inside. What you want to do is grab anything that needs painting, because you want to get it all into that position where it's all done together. You don't want to be, going around and then suddenly you've finished your paint, cleaned your airbrush up, and then you have to go back and do something else. So things like, we've got these fuel tanks here, already sanded and taken care of, but what we need to do, I'm just going to pop a hole, drill a hole into this, just to make it easier to handle. So there's one there, and one there. So then what we can do, we can grab a cocktail stick, so it's easier to paint these because we've got them on a system, and secondly you can just stick them in a bit of block or something like that for when they're drying. Just makes it all a lot easier. I'm just going to pop these tails on. I'm going to have them as a soft fit, as in not glued yet, so we can put them upside down. Might as well put them up the right way. Very loose fit, that one. So what we'll do, we'll have them as a separate, and we'll put them onto spring-loaded clamps like this. Okay, and that way it'll stop them going everywhere. Normally I'll just put them on for speed, but they're quite a loose fit, so we won't worry about that. We're just going to up our area here just to protect our desk. Okay. Alright, now primers. As I said, you can do it from a rattle can. Probably a little bit too heavy for something like this, if we're honest. If you're doing a big item, a rattle can with car primer, absolutely fine. It's cheap, it's £2.50 a can. Make sure it's well mixed, but the thing is, it does tend to be very heavy on such a small object. You can decant, bit of false economy, but you can spray this out into your colour cup and then spray it from your airbrush out, which does it a little bit nicer. But really, I think it's a little bit overkill. You can go out and buy proper primers. We've got here these Vallejo. This is polyurethane. It's a great primer. Takes a while to go off, don't get me wrong, it's not a quick fix one, but certainly it's very good. It hides all imperfections, any blemishes, things like that. Really is nice stuff. Or you could just use an acrylic paint. Because really, with primer, all you're trying to do is put down a coat of paint onto your model, so you can see if all your finishes, as in your joins, gaps, if you've got any lumps, bumps, things like that need taken care of. You can do that before you move on with your proper paint work, and obviously it gives a bed for the rest of the paint to actually get on and stick to. So, as many of my older videos you would have seen, put around these the right way, you will have seen me actually go in and just use normal Tamiya paint. So what we're going to do, we've got black in here still, alright, so we're just going to empty that out. There we go, and then what we're going to do, we've got our airbrush cleaner, just going to pop that in, just going to give it a bit of a brush round. Okay, we're just going to tip that away, blow out the excess. Okay, that's all good. Just grab our, there's a wipe. Okay, there we go, good to go. Right, when you're mixing out your paint, always put your thinners in first, really important. What happens is, if you don't put the thinners in first, it'll actually clog up your airbrush with thick paint, because what happens is you put it in, the paint goes straight down to the needle area, starts to work its way along towards the end, then you put the thinners on top, you mix it up, but you can't mix what you've already put into the airbrush. So that way you've got to spit out this real thick nasty stuff before you can get to your nice mix that you did before. I'm just going to do a standard 50-50 mix, and I'll do it by eye, but obviously you could measure it. So you just put in 50% thinners to 50% paint. Now you could mix these externally into a separate cup, but trust me, far too much is made of people talking about the thicknesses of paint, your consistencies and airbrushes, okay? Like we were talking about with cars and starting them on hills, there's lots of variables. So if it's a little bit thick, you can up your air pressure, okay? If you up your air pressure, you need to move slightly away from your model, and so forth and so on. It's only when you're doing detailed, very fine work, then you adjust things. For just painting, you won't have a problem. So we've got this paint in here now, so we're just going to test our flow of the paint. So we're just putting it down and doing like we did before, okay? You can do noughts and crosses and all the things, just to making sure it's come out. But what you're looking for is consistency. So when you pull and push, it's just the same amount of paint continuously flowing through. Now, if you're in a really hot country, okay, and you're in the situation where it's baking hot, very, very low humidity as well, you might find that it dries on the needle, which causes spitting, clogging, and you pull the trigger and nothing happens, things like that. What you can do, he says, just looking for it, is buy a retarder. Now, a retarder, all this is slows acrylic paint from drying, he says, desperately now looking for his bottle and can't find it. But you can buy bottles of retarder by a company called like Winsor & Newton, things like that, and all you do is put a few drops into your paintwork and away you go, and you're absolutely fine with it. Sorry about that, it's around somewhere. So right, now we can actually prime our model. So this may be the first time you're going to be putting paint onto your model, okay? I always hold by the tail, but you could hold anywhere you like, alright? So what you want to do is start off of the model. Don't start pointing it at the model, start off to one side, pull down, push for air, pull a little bit till you got paint coming through, then onto your model, and then just keep moving. And I'm doing, you see, little flicky back movements. Okay, now as soon as it starts to look wet, stop. Okay, you don't want to be doing it any longer than you actually have to. If it's looking wet, you run the risk then of runs and things like that. Now, if you've got spits in your paintwork, okay, it's probably because it's not mixed enough and properly enough in your colour cup, okay? So what you want to do is literally just add more thinners into your colour cup and just continue to mix it up, maybe pour it back out, and away you go. But that'll be your reason to it. So what we're going to do, we're going to carry on, and as you can see, we're just lightly building it up, and we're always moving. Don't keep stationary for any time whatsoever. Okay, and as you can see, you don't have to be going in certain directions and things like that. You can just literally go up and down movements, you can do circles. But what you're trying to do is keep it somewhat even. You don't want to be in a situation where you've got it heavier on one side and not on the other. Now, if you're coming along and then all of a sudden it looks really, really wet, just stop, come away from it, let it dry naturally. Or just with air, so that means just pulling down, not pulling back, keep a little bit of distance away so you don't cause a run, and just lightly brush it like this, airbrush over the top to dry the area, and you'll see it happen. What happens is it looks very wet and shiny, and then it'll just dry off and go pale. So we just do the front here, over the top. Okay, if you find it starts to stop, for want of a better word, but you're spraying and then nothing sort of happens, okay, come away to your spray mat, pull the trigger all the way back and pump it. What's normally happening is you've got a little tiny bit of build-up on the end of the needle, and what happens is it starts to sort of backfill and dry. By doing that, it blows it up out and gets it out of the way. The other thing as well you can do is just grab a bit of paper, and with this one you can just clean the end, or the other way is with a cotton bud, you can just soak it in a little bit of thinners and just give it a small little wipe each side, just to clean that up. Back over to your area and spray it off, and then we'll continue. Okay, so you're just literally dusting a little coat on Then as soon as you've got a bit of paint on there, you can come in with a thicker coat. But as you can see, I can go right in very close, okay, or you can do it further away. But if you're doing it further away, you need to be a little bit more heavy, okay? So we just go down the back. And remember, this is just a primer to see how your model's looking. So if you needed to take care of any problems with it, like we'll show you in a moment, you can do that now before the rest of it. Okay, so we're not going to do the tail because I'm holding it, and we've just done up to that area. Okay, and there we go. So you're looking for nice, smooth look to your paintwork. But again, if it's looking wet, just move away, you know, and you'll be absolutely fine with it. Things to look out for when you're doing primer work. As you might be able to see down here in the middle, we have a bit of a gap appeared just down there. Okay, what that is literally where the filler, or in this case because it's just glue, has sunk down. You may remember, for those of you who watched the construction one, at the front part of it is super glue, no problem at all, rear part has done it. So what you do now, let this dry for around about half hour, sand that off, take care of that little problem, okay, then you can come back in, reprime over the top, and then you carry on with your actual build all the way through. So it's a great way to have a look at your model, because whatever you have with the primer stage here, you will get with your painting stage, because it's not going to hide it. It's not like paintbrushing where you could put a little bit extra paint down and hide that problem. When you're airbrushing, it's more like plating. So whatever's down there stands up. That's why all your panel lining and raised detail will be there no matter what you do when you're airbrushing. Whereas perhaps if you've been hand painting with a brush, those details get lost if you've got too many coats of paint on it. But there we go. That's about putting down the primer onto that one. Very, very straightforward. So what we do, we just stick him over here. We can do the same on this little Spitfire guy. We'll just do around the top canopy to get rid of that flag. Okay, and as I say, don't be frightened of it, and you can use this time to see how you get on, okay? To have a practice with you actually using paint. Because you can't go wrong, it's all fun, or certainly should be.